Hey everybody, Father Warner here. We have completed so far the prophets Amos, we finished the prophet Hosea, and we did the prophet Micah. I'm now going to begin the prophet Jeremiah simply because liturgically we began studying or listening to the prophet Jeremiah in the first reading somewhere last week, in the 16th week in ordinary time. Now each day what I do is in the description box, even though I'm teaching you the prophets chapter by chapter and verse by verse, in the description box that's just below this video, you'll see the words more. Click on it and you might find the word more again. Click on that again and you will see links to previous teachings I've done, and these teachings are they correspond to the first reading and the gospel of the day. So even if you don't want to follow the prophets and you still want a teaching on the first reading or the gospel, simply click on the description box and then click on the links. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is I know that studying scripture is difficult, but I think it's high time we stop asking for shortcuts. Father, give us a brief reflection on the day. Let us assuage our guilty consciences and get away with it and tell God we did something, we listened to something. No, I think the time has come that we study our faith and defend our faith. And I say this with a certain sense of anger. You all know that the Olympics have begun in Paris to a disastrous start. I mean, the nonsense that they put up as part of their opening ceremony, mocking Christ, mocking the Christian faith, mocking the Last Supper, mocking the Eucharist. And I am glad that people like Father Michael Payapalli, Bishop Barron responded immediately, but I am saddened, and I'm also glad that the Bishops' Conference of France has spoken out, but by and large, the silence from the Vatican is deafening. And very often, we want to be politically correct rather than stand up for our faith. You cannot test the waters when people have gone way past testing our patience. Can I say that again? You cannot test the waters to see if everything, what we're going to say next is going to sound right to the world. Somebody said, Father, forgive them. I said, yes, but it's also time to stand up. Forgiveness does not mean that we do not ask those people responsible for a crime, because in many nations, offending another faith is a crime. And I know that what Bishop Barron said was something that resonates in my heart. We don't want to say it, but he said very clearly, he said, had this happened to another religious faith, and I don't want to label certain religions as being violent, but I think I'd like to label them as those who are willing to stand up for their faith. And had this happened with some other religion, as some commentator said, Paris would have burnt. I am not advocating violence. I'm advocating a sense of outrage that is absent among Christians and especially among the official church, the Catholic Church. It's a silence. I cannot understand why any bishop should not be speaking out boldly and loudly. And I think the least you can do is write a strong letter to the ambassador in your own country, the ambassador to France, and tell him of your outrage. Even the news channels, and I've been following in India, have been rather muted. Had this happened to, as I said, any other faith, they would have brought France to its knees. We would have cut off economic ties. We would have boycotted their goods. But when it comes to the Catholic faith, and by the way, a very important industrialist's wife is a member of the IOC. Yeah, I would like to have even Neeta Ambani speak up for the outrage against the Christians and what was done in the name. She's a member of the International Olympic Committee. She can put a photograph of her and her husband standing there. I'm sure she has the decency to also speak for a religion when it is mocked. And if she was part of this planning, then she ought to take equal amount of responsibility. Those are my starting words with regard to today. I'm going to begin teaching you the prophet Jeremiah. The prophet Jeremiah suffered much. His own people turned against him. He was thrown in prison. He was called the weeping prophet. But he was one tough cookie. And yet, in his great struggles that he experienced, he came to such low points of his ministry that he tells God, "You seduced me and I got seduced. Why did I ever take up this job? I want to give in my resignation." But then he also recognizes the need to stand up when all others choose to follow and toe the party line. In teaching you the prophet Jeremiah, I might end up betraying my own struggle with the church, as I just did, and the silence of the church on just about anything and everything. We may not condemn abortionists in general, but when we shake hands with the President of the United States, Joe Biden, I have a problem with that. Now, let's go to Jeremiah. And I want to say this: keep a book and a pen ready, because we're going to do a bit of history, and without history, without context, remember, text must be read in its context, or you have a pretext for misinterpretation of scripture. So this is going to be difficult. I know that many of my viewers are well past the age of 60, and some of you have said, "Father, it's enlightening, but it's also challenging." So you might have to watch this several times, listen to it several times. It's okay, pause, listen to it again, make notes. And but I'm going to assure you that I will be as simple as possible, because there are several kings, several names, several plots, several assassinations, and Jeremiah lives through dealing with 4 kings. Yeah, he ministers through the reign of 4 kings. So going back a bit in history, we are in the era of what we call BC, before Christ. We are in the 8th century. We saw 4 prophets. This was called the period of the golden age of prophecy. In the northern kingdom, when it stood before it was taken over by Assyria, remember, you have 2 kingdoms. The northern kingdom was the kingdom of Israel. Its capital was in Samaria. It had shrines in Gilgal. The southern kingdom was called the kingdom of Judah, and it had its capital, both spiritual, religious, as well as political, in Jerusalem. We know that all the kings of the northern kingdom never found favor with God, because they were idol worshippers. Of the southern kingdom, there were a few kings who found favor with God. Now, in the northern kingdom, or rather in the 8th century, you have 4 great prophets, and that's why it's called the period of the golden age of prophecy. In the north, you had Amos and Hosea. I told you Amos was a prophet from the south, from the southern kingdom, but he prophesies in the northern kingdom. Hosea also prophesies to the northern kingdom. In the south, in Judah, you had 2 great prophets. One was Micah, whom we studied last week, and the other was the prophet Isaiah, who I hope to do sometime. Now, the ministry of all these 4 prophets ended in the year 701 in the reign of King Hezekiah. Hezekiah dies in the year 687. Now, please pull out a pen and paper. You need to write these things down. So, Hezekiah dies in the year 687. We know that 100 years later, in the year 586, 587, the southern kingdom of Judah will be defeated by the Babylonians. The people will be taken into exile. The city will be demolished. The walls will be broken down, and the temple will not have a stone standing on each other. In these 100 years from the golden age of prophecy to the destruction of Jerusalem, you will see 4 prophets, principally Zephaniah, Nahum and Habakkuk, and of course the one that we are going to study, the prophet Jeremiah. Politically, what's happening is that the southern kingdom, Judah, was a vassal state of Assyria. The northern kingdom, remember, was defeated by Assyria and its people taken into exile. And then the southern kingdom too, under 3 kings, King Manasseh, King Amos, and King Josiah, are vassals of Assyria. So they're paying tribute. Obviously, we know that Manasseh is called one of the worst kings of the southern kingdom. His son Ammon is assassinated within a few months of taking over, and Josiah is cut from another cloth. Okay, we will talk about King Josiah. So let me just give you a brief, and you need, again, I'm going to say, pull out a pen. So in the year 612 BC, the Assyrians, who were ruling all this while, they were a superpower, they are going to be defeated. So remember, 612 is the year when the Babylonians and the Medes, 2 empires, get together and they are going to defeat the Assyrians. The Assyrians were the ones who were the superpower up to now. Between 612 BC and 609 BC, Judah experiences independence. Why? Because they were vassals of Assyria. Now that the Babylonians and Medes have defeated the Assyrians, really the Babylonians have not asserted their right over Judah. So for 3 years, there is a sense of independence in Judah. Then in the year 609 and all the way down to 605, for the next 4 years, in 609, the Egyptians will once again conquer Judah. And Judah, with Jerusalem as its capital, will be a vassal nation of Egypt. But then in 603, the Babylonians will defeat the Egyptians. They will take over Judah. And from 603 BC right up till 586, 587 BC, the Babylonians will be reigning over Judah and over Jerusalem. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because our prophet Jeremiah lived through the last days through the kings Josiah, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. He's going to minister during the period of 4 southern kings. He is going to see the last days before Babylon destroys Jerusalem. He saw the fall of Assyria, so he's already seen Assyria as a superpower being destroyed by the Babylonians. He saw his country being subordinated and subjugated by the Babylonians. He saw the Babylonians destroy the city of Jerusalem, and finally he saw the deportation of his people taken into exile. Now, looking at the life and the ministry of the prophet Jeremiah, I'm going to do it a little more towards the end of this video. And today's video, I want to assure you, is a long one, so get ready, okay? If you need to take a break to do that, but listen to the entire video and listen to it several times. So, the prophet Jeremiah was born in the year 645 BC. Unlike the other prophets, we have a lot of historical evidence, both biblical and extra-biblical, of the life and times of the prophet Jeremiah. So, born in 645 BC, God calls him to be a prophet in the year 627 BC. Jeremiah was but 18 years. He was a youth. And I want to say this straight away to young people. If you think that God is calling you at the age of 14, 12 and 18, He is calling you. The mistake that many seminaries have made and bishops have made is to begin to go the way of the world and say, well, experience the world, come and join the seminary when you are mature enough. God called David when he was but a youth. He called Jeremiah when he was but a youth. God has a habit of calling stutterers and stammerers. And John Marie Vianney, our patron whose feast we'll celebrate on the 4th of August, was considered a duffer and a dullard. You know, we delay vocations. If someone has a vocation, I think we'd rather send them to a seminary and let them be formed rather than let them be deformed by the world. And when some might say, well, taking a child as young as 18 or 15 into a seminary is a matter of brainwashing, I have this to say. They are already being brainwashed by the world. How else do you explain that 12-year-olds are being taught about transgenders and advertisers are openly advertising for hormonal blockers on mainline national TV channels? Brainwashing is being very effectively done by the media. But when the church wishes to educate her own and form people, we are accused of brainwashing. What a shame when our bishops and formators fall for this trap of the world. We need to stand up and hold our ground, or else we are going to be lost. So, Jeremiah was called at the age of 18. As I said, the kings that reigned during this time were Kings Josiah. Now, I want you to learn these names because 3 of them are in J and 1 is in Z. Josiah was a good king. He is followed by his son, whose name is Jehoiakim. Remember it as K-I-M, Kim. If you know of any Kim, Kimberly, so Jehoiakim, who is followed by his son Jehoiachin, as in C-H-I-N, so Jehoiachin, and finally followed by their uncle, whose name was changed to Zedekiah. Zedekiah is the last of the kings of the southern kingdom. With him, Jerusalem will fall. So Jeremiah is prophesying to Josiah the king, to Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zed for Zedekiah. Do not confuse Zedekiah with another name very close which starts with H. Okay, so Hezekiah, that's who I'm talking about. Zedekiah and Hezekiah are different. Remember, Zed is the last letter of the alphabet. He is the last king of the southern kingdom. So after this, Jeremiah will continue his ministry, but that under the governorship of a man called Gedaliah, and he is a governor appointed by Babylon. I will come to all of this. Remember, I said the contemporaries of the prophet Jeremiah are the prophets Nahum, the prophet Habakkuk, and the prophet Zephaniah. Now, I'm going to briefly go through the political history at this time, and this is a little bit tough, but listen to it because it's important. When we are studying the first 25 books of the prophet Jeremiah, we need to understand what was happening politically. So I'm going to breeze through 4 kings and 1 governor. Who are the kings? Josiah, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah, and then the governor Gedaliah. So the king Josiah was reigned during the years 640 to 609. If you want to read about King Josiah, go to 2 Kings chapter 22 verse 1 to chapter 23 verse 30, and also 1 Chronicles chapter 34 verses 1 to 1 Chronicles chapter 35 verse 27. Remember that the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles gives us insights into the historical background of both the northern kingdom as well as the southern kingdom. So Josiah from 640 to 609 BC. Now Josiah was one of the good kings. So Jeremiah's ministry begins on a good note because here is a good king of Judah. And he is known for the reforms that he brought about. When we studied the book of Kings briefly, you will remember that it is during the reign of King Josiah that Hilkiah the priest finds the Torah which was lost. Now, Incidentally, Jeremiah's father is Hilkiah, and we know that Jeremiah came from a priestly family. Whether Hilkiah, the father of Jeremiah, is the same man who found the scrolls, we are not sure. But it is in Josiah's time that a priest called Hilkiah finds the 5 books of what we call the Pentateuch, what the Jews called the law or the Torah. And as a consequence of this, we know that Josiah brings in tremendous reforms. All the altars to Baal and the pillars to the fertility gods are destroyed, and he brings in the Josiah reforms. Now, during this time, in the year 612, as I already told you, Assyria, the superpower, was defeated. And the king, if you want to read about this, read the prophet Nahum. Now, post the reform that Josiah brought and post the falling of Assyria as a superpower, King Josiah goes through a period of disillusionment, discouragement, and disappointment. Now, at around this time, Pharaoh Necho, who was the king of Egypt, who was an ally of the Assyrians, seeing the Assyrians defeated and seeing the Assyrian nation tottering literally, for some reason decides to march up and help this tottering Assyrian nation that's falling apart. But to do this, he had to go through Judah. For some odd reason, King Josiah decides to stop him. And we know that Josiah is mortally wounded in this battle. He is brought to Jerusalem and Josiah dies. Now, the people of Judah decide by themselves to put on the throne the younger son of King Josiah. King Josiah had 2 sons. The first son's name was Eliakim, and the second son, whose biblical name is Shallum, but his regal name is Jehoahaz. So the second son, Shallum, who takes on the name Jehoahaz, is put on the throne by the people of Judah. But remember that Pharaoh Necho had defeated Judah, and so he decides it is not Jehoahaz who will be on the throne, but the elder brother Eliakim. And he puts Eliakim on the throne. He takes Jehoahaz he takes him captive into Egypt, puts the elder son Eliakim on the throne, and changes his name to Jehoiakim, K-I-M. Okay, so now you know where Jehoiakim comes from. Jehoiakim is the son of King Josiah, the elder son, and Pharaoh Necho puts him on the throne. And Jehoiakim is going to be on the throne from the years 609 to 598. Now, really, Jehoiakim, remember K-I-M, Kim comes before Chin, okay? So there's another king called Jehoiachin after this, hang on. But Jehoiakim really, therefore, is a puppet, a political puppet of the Egyptians. He's going to do whatever his Egyptian bosses ask him to do. At this point of time, the Egyptians decide to take on the Babylonians in a battle. And in the year 605, somewhere in March or April of the year 605, it's a very famous historical battle. It's called the Battle of Karshemish. I've taught you this before. At the Battle of Karshemish, the Babylonians will defeat the Egyptians. Now, after defeating the Egyptians, the Babylonians decided to march southwards. So they attacked Syria, not Assyria, but Syria was another nation called Aram in the Bible. So they attack Syria, then they attack Palestine, and the king who's doing all this attacking, his name is Nabopolassar. Okay, Nabopolassar. On his way to Judah, he dies. He dies in the year 605, in August or September of 605. He has a son called Nebuchadnezzar. You've heard this name before. You've heard it in the book of Daniel. He's the king who addresses Daniel and his 4 companions, Shadrach, Meshach, 3 companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So Nebuchadnezzar goes back because his father has died. He goes back to claim the throne and he becomes king. Having become king, he decides to come once again southward and he defeats the nation of the Philistines and then lands up at the door of Jerusalem. Now, our king right now is Jehoiakim, K-I-M, okay, don't forget that. Jehoiakim just surrenders the city and he becomes a vassal of the Babylonians in 603. Up to now, they were vassals of Assyria, vassals of Egypt. Now, Judah is a vassal nation of the Babylonians. Now, in 601, Egypt, that was already defeated at the Battle of Karshemish, decided to pick on another fight with the Babylonians. And this was a tough battle because both the Babylonians and the Egyptians suffered tremendous losses. Jerusalem, under King Jehoiakim, incorrectly read this battle. They thought that the Babylonians were defeated, they were down and out, and they decided to declare their independence. Big mistake. In fact, the prophet Jeremiah clashes with King Jehoiakim, and we'll see this several times. They never got along at all. So, Babylon now, which was not actually defeated, decided to march on Jerusalem because Jerusalem had revolted. And just before they arrive in December 598, Jehoiakim dies. He dies. Jehoiakim is followed by his son Jehoiachin, C-H-I-N. And Jehoiachin is just 18 years old. In 3 months of taking over the throne, he surrenders to the Babylonians. He just throws open the doors, the gates of Jerusalem. He allows the Babylonians in. And Nebuchadnezzar treats the city with this kindness. Let me explain what that kindness is. Kindness meant that they didn't destroy the city, but they take away everything from the royal sanctuary. They take away all the vessels from the temple. Remember in the book of Daniel, the king, the Babylonian king, asks for the vessels of the temple of Jerusalem to be brought out, and they are feasting and drinking, and a writing on the wall appears. The words are mene, mene, tekel, et parsin. And Daniel is called in and he says to the king, God says, you have been weighed and found wanting, and you will die because you drank from the vessels of the temple. So very clearly, Jehoiachin in 3 months surrenders the city, and Jehoiachin, our Chini fellow, is taken prisoner to Babylon, and it is in Babylon that he will die. Now, what's happening in Jerusalem at this point of time? Nebuchadnezzar, now that he's taken Jehoiachin into Babylon, he appoints Mattaniah. Who is Mattaniah? Mattaniah is the brother of King Josiah and the uncle of Jehoiachin and Jehoiakim. So Mattaniah is put on the throne, and his name is changed to Zedekiah. The Babylonians change his name to show that they have control. Now, it is at this point of time that several false prophets give the people as well as Zedekiah hope that God will defeat the Babylonians. Incidentally, Nebuchadnezzar will have several of these false prophets of Jerusalem slaughtered, okay? And we'll read this in the book of Jeremiah. So Zedekiah is in charge, and then out of the blue, several nations, Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, Tyre, Sidon, all of them meet in Jerusalem to kind of raise the flag of revolt against the Babylonians. The Egyptians decide not to join in. And watching this, Zedekiah sends an envoy to Babylon as if to say, we are sorry. But once again, in the year 589, Zedekiah, we are told, revolts against Babylon. In the year of January 587, Nebuchadnezzar marches on to Jerusalem. He blockades the entire city, and they hold out for a year. They are starving. The city is starving. Jerusalem is starving. And by the year 587, 586, the food supply is completely over. Zedekiah, as I've taught you before, flees with a few out of the city. He's chased by the Babylonians. He's captured at Jericho, brought back to Babylon. There, before his eyes, his sons are killed one after the other, and then the Babylonians take out his eyes. The last thing he ever sees was his own sons being killed. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is in no shape or form to forgive. He goes back to Jerusalem. He tears down the walls of Jerusalem, burns the temple to the ground, and leaves the city completely ruined. We know that the people are taken into exile. What happens to Jeremiah? Jeremiah remains, he's a taken prisoner, but he's given a choice to either go to Babylon or to stay in Jerusalem. And Jeremiah, from Jeremiah 40 verse 6, he stays with the people in the land. What the Babylonians do now is appoint a governor, and his name is Gedaliah. But since Jerusalem is burned down, Gedaliah decides to set up a capital, his governing area, in a place called Mizpah. You can read about Gedaliah in 2 Kings chapter 25 verse 22. Gedaliah's father was a man who had also saved Jeremiah's life. Read Jeremiah chapter 26 verse 29. In any case, Gedaliah is then assassinated. He is assassinated by a distant relative called Ishmael of the royal family, who plots against him. Gedaliah is being told that there is people plotting against you. He doesn't listen. So read Jeremiah chapter 40 verse 13 to chapter 41 verse 18 about his assassination. He's having dinner, he's assassinated, he's not even ruled for a year. Now, the people, by the way, he not only kills all those who served at Mizpah, all the officials, he kills the entire Babylonian garrison that was left behind, and he killed 70 pilgrims. Only 10 pilgrims escaped. Now, the people of who are left behind with Jeremiah tell Jeremiah, look, let's flee, ask God, what shall we do? And Jeremiah says, give me 10 days. He comes back and he says, no, God says, let's stay. But the people are too frightened. And so they force Jeremiah to flee with them and go into Egypt. Read Jeremiah chapter 42 verse 1 to chapter 43 verse 7. They compel him, and Jeremiah spends his last few years in Egypt. Read Jeremiah chapter 43 verse 8 to chapter 44 verse 30. I'm going to end this teaching very quickly. It's already 32 minutes, but very quickly with Jeremiah's background. First of all, his name Jeremiah means Yahweh loosens or Yahweh hurls. Yahweh literally hurls him into a tough situation. We know that, as I said, he was born in the year 645 and becomes a prophet. God calls him to prophesy by the year 677. The scriptures describe him as a youth, or Nar, N-A-A-R, which means that he was a teenager, he was of marriageable age. He comes from the city of Anathoth. Anathoth was 3 kilometers north of Jerusalem. It was a priestly enclave. The priests lived close to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was an expensive place to stay, and so 3 kilometers would mean that they had easy access to Jerusalem, and he lived in Anathoth. His father, as I told you, was Hilkiah. We don't know whether he's the same Hilkiah who finds the Torah while the temple was being restored during the reign of King Josiah. Quickly, and I'm going to end with this. How do we break up the 52 chapters of Jeremiah? Chapters 1 to 25 will tell us about general oracles against Judah. Chapter 26 to 45 are devoted to stories of Jeremiah's life. Chapter 46 to 51 is oracles against other nations, and chapter 52 is really a historical supplement. If you want more references to that historical supplement, read 2 Kings chapter 24 verse 18 to chapter 25 verse 21. Now, I want to say this. As we study the book, I don't know how I'm going to approach it. 52 chapters. If I start doing, it's about almost 2 months. So I'm going to take certain sections. Maybe I'll do 2 chapters at a time, and important lines or verses. And I hope, let me see, because I want to tell you it takes me a good part of 2.5 hours to study each day, a good half an hour to record, and then with the internet situation that I have, I'm either driving to Margao or sitting with the phone almost shoved into the router. I'm going to do my best to teach you. I'm going to do my best. Given the fact that when I speak this long, my cheek gets extremely heavy. Remember, I've lost 50% of the muscles in my right face. Studying Jeremiah with you is going to be emotionally difficult for me. And maybe one day I will share with you my own personal struggle spiritually with the church, with the faith. Not that I've lost my faith, but I have differences very often with the way the institution, those who run the institution of the church, go about it. I believe we could do, I'm not saying I'm the best, but I'm sometimes saying we can do a better job. We can do a much better job. And the case in point being the Olympics. Just too much of nonsense is being thrown at the church, and just too much of silence. I don't pretend to understand the compulsions of those who run the Catholic Church, but I certainly know that they aren't defending it loud enough. Pray for me, pray for the church, pray for our faith as I keep you in prayer. The Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. It's been a long, long teaching, almost 36 minutes, the longest I've ever taught. But this is essential in order for us to go ahead with the book of Jeremiah. So if you survived this long, I still suggest you listen to it all over again. Bye, everybody.